Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing some more reaction content and I'm going to kick things off with a video created by Commend. Now this is one about a legendary team that we all know and love and I'm looking forward to it. I didn't watch this when it came out, but I'm looking for a little bit of nostalgia. Obviously we've just had champions, EMEA lost, so I want to go back to a better time. I want to go back to a time when EMEA ruled them all and watch a little bit of the story of Gambit.
Sentinels, Gambit, Optic, last year's Loud, and the current iteration of Fnatic. Valorant has had 5 teams that were the undisputed best at some point in the game's history. 4 of them still exist today. The only team that doesn't is the team who are arguably
4 of
the
them
best
still
of them
exist
all.
for now.
This is the story of Gambit.
It's not looking good for NRG, what I've seen
recently.
recently.
All of the major games and found international success in most. They look to repeat that in Valorant, and so joined the scene very early on in the game's lifespan. By September 2020, only a few months after the game had left beta, they'd already signed the roster to compete in the CIS region, looking towards the first
They
tournament in
dominated.
Valorant
Like the
esports,
early,
First Strike.
that was the thing. I
Every
kept
region
an eye
hosts
on
only
like
First Strike tournament, with other
early
winners including 100 Thieves
CIS, because I did a lot of CIS in Counter-Strike.
Take the crown in Russia. They fought their way into the main event against other Russian teams.
Yeah, like you look at the
Forza and
team,
Singularity,
it's basically
but
already
wouldn't be able
there.
to take the title. So Gambit hadn't found success immediately with this roster, and so decided to switch a player out. This is where we see the 5 players who would eventually take over international Valorant on the same team.
It was such a long-standing roster, but that was what Gambit did really well.
He'd replace Sunset
Was they like
IGL on the Smokes role,
stuck with their rosters for so long and really built on
a
them.
reputation he still holds to this day. Next up was Nat, the team's Sentinel player. He was known as a ratty player at the time, but maybe hadn't quite played up to his full potential yet. Defo was Gambit's duelist. He wasn't super flashy, but that meant he played off his teammates' utility well and didn't overheat too much. And finally, their 2 flex players, both all-around crack.
I always
players in
remember
both game sense and aim,
like talking to
Shadows
Mitch,
and
and he was
Chronicle.
like,
This
in
new and improved
scrims,
roster would play in the
Defo was
first CIS
unplayable.
Challenges
Like he
split,
was the most
culminating in the
unplayable
regional
player. Obviously,
With
Mitch
their
at the
new
time
roster,
was
they managed
analyst
to
of
win both
Alliance.
Challenges and Masters without dropping a single map.
For me
They
though, I
proved
would always
themselves
watch
as the best
like
team in Russia. And
Nats,
after another almost flawless split,
because he
that
always
led
just
them
had
to play
the
against
coolest
best
setups
teams
ever.
from all of Europe. Only 2 European teams would be invited to the first global Valorant LAN, held in Reykjavik, Iceland. For Gambit to make it, they would have to go through a group stage bracket and then come top 2 in the playoffs. Gambit were up against FPX to see who made it through to the playoffs, and with big performances from Defo and Nats, they took the win. They were now only 1 game away from competing on the international stage.
Were they
against
denied
the
by
titans of early EU Valorant?
Fnatic? Yeah.
Takes down Nats. It's not looking too good for Gambit. They need to turn up here, man, but there's just nothing they can do.
Fnatic showed why they had such a feared reputation in this match.
Me and Mitch
taking
hyped up
2-0
Gambit a
over
lot, and then they got
advancing
banged.
to Masters Reykjavik, and almost winning the entire thing. Gambit hadn't made it this time, but when the next international LAN rolled around, Masters Berlin, they would not be denied. They would practice the same executes 24 rounds in a row in scrims, with almost no days off. They were incredibly dedicated to perfecting their gameplay.
They were the scrim demons. Everybody
Another
feared them in
flawless split
scrims.
Russia,
If you could beat
again granted
Gambit,
them
which you
passage to the
couldn't, but if you
European
could,
playoffs. Once there, they won 2-0 over Guild with a 19-17 in the second map.
then
These
well,
crazy
you
map
felt pretty
scores
good about
become
yourself.
Somewhat of a pattern for Gambit, and then lost 2-1 to Ascend to go down to the lower bracket. They once again activated lower bracket Demon mode to win over Liquid, which was actually the match that qualified them to Masters.
Their
They
games
didn't
versus
stop there,
Liquid
though,
were always
taking
just
down G2,
disgusting.
Ascend and SMB to win the playoff bracket overall. They suddenly found themselves as the favourites from Europe heading into Berlin. Could they live up to those expectations? At Berlin, they found themselves in possibly the easiest group. Gambit, 100 Thieves, Crazy Raccoon,
Crazy
and
Raccoon.
Liberty.
Oh, don't
Thieves
show
were
the
definitely
Crazy
a threat,
Raccoon
but
game.
the 2 other teams,
Don't do it,
not
Commend.
so much.
Let's
In
just
their
skip
first match
forward.
against Crazy Raccoon,
Nah,
Gambit
we
only
didn't
got 2
need
rounds
this.
in the whole series. They then played 100 Thieves, which is
I
the first
casted the
matchup in
fucking
NA
Crazy
versus
Raccoon
EMEA
game.
rivalry.
I barely have any friends.
Was this the mega choke?
Let's go, let's go! You're so insane, Nico! Holy shit!
The Commend knows what he's doing. He's used the Kaide clips.
Gambit didn't manage to take it despite it being so close, and therefore play the rematch against Crazy Raccoon in the lower bracket. This was a much closer game.
Yeah, it was
Gambit
way
still took it
closer.
to
I
low
don't know
and moved
why.
on to
The first
playoffs.
time they just
Masters
shit
Berlin was
stomped
back in
them.
Valorant days of old, where we had single elim playoff brackets, so if Gambit lost once, they'd be out, and it would not get easier. Their first opponents in the playoffs were a team who had won over 100 series in a row. They
Oh
were
shit,
known
it's
for
the
their
old Vision
innovative strategy,
Strikers.
and had
Oh my
only
god, it's
beaten SMB
Lakia!
and Ascend in the group stages. That team was Vision
He got
Strikers,
sent to the
the
Shadow
Korean
Realm.
powerhouse. How would
Also
Gambit
known
fare
as
against Asia's
the
number one
TRX bench.
Good for one. The Rolling Thunder not providing a ton of value as Nats is there as well. They're entirely unfazed by that ultimate. The classic is there. Oh my gosh! Nats! Gambit! What have we just seen?
Really well, apparently. A 13-2 on the first
Their
map
bind
set them
was
up to take
always
the series
filth.
pretty comfortably.
Their defense
So
on
they
bind,
moved
I
on
should
to face
say.
G2
Their
in the
attack
next
on bind
round.
was cheeks.
But before we talk about that series, we need to mention a player on Gambit who'd caught the eyes of the world in Berlin. Nats had begun to develop a playstyle where he could seemingly sneak behind enemy lines completely
This is the
unnoticed.
13-0,
We'd seen it to some
right?
degree before, but Nats brought lurking
I
to a whole
casted
new
this.
level in Masters Berlin, and there's no better map to show that on than Icebox versus G2.
Me and Mitch.
Gambit had taken the first map 13-10, and so if they won this one too, they'd be into the grand finals.
Nats, it gives them a way back into the round. Instead, it just comes out to this moment, and oh, they've seen it, but he still manages to come out with 3! Ridiculous from Mixwell, leaving just Nats. He thought he'd given his weird team listening a to your own
Oh,
voice. voice. In towards the A side. Instead, he sent them to their death.
We thought Nats had snuck
This
by
is
Mixwell. It turns
one of the
out it
greatest
was
clutches
the other
ever.
way around.
Like,
Nats now having
this
to
second
clutch
kill,
this one out.
he's
No idea
fucking
where Mixwell is,
reloading.
and the snake bite
He is
not quite
reloading.
clearing the
Look,
angle.
he reloads here.
Outside reloading.
How?
Mixwell completely whiffs. Nats really pushing
My voice
out.
doesn't go that high.
Kills.
I swear my voice doesn't go that high.
Seems to be no way for G2 to get off the starting point. Mixwell, by the looks of things, Defo's holding it with an op, and that's going to be the rifle dropped. Look at
He's
this,
such
but
a
I mean,
rat
out
bastard.
here. He's the rattiest player I've ever seen in my life. The fact that he can look 2 kills, why not? Yeah, give him all
Oh
of them.
god.
Not really gonna get away with anything for now.
This is, I remember this.
No, but how? How is he there? How is he there?
I'm laughing
I
at
don't
myself.
understand. How does he manage to do that? And oh, he's gonna get.
Joe, I saw a comment the other day saying it was basically, it showed the other clip, the first one, and they were like, "Oh, you almost showed one of my favorite clips." It was a moment where Sideshow said, "How is Nats here?" And I was like, that all bald people aren't the same. Like, we're both British, but we're not even from the same part of England. Like, come on, man. Come on. I don't even think Sideshow was doing Valorant yet. That's the worst thing about...
Kill Mixers! What is this man doing?
We'll move on.
Tag, they're losing.
I really want to move on. This was one... I came into this thinking it would be one of the best games I've ever casted, and instead this happened.
They'll give themselves a bit of hope, but Shados looking to
This was when G2... This was a semi-final. This is when people actually thought G2 were going to be good. Well, they did. They got to the semi-final. I think they beat Sentinels.
Humiliated as Gambit make their way through to the final, and who the hell will doubt them now?
They'd made it into the grand finals in incredible fashion, a 13-0 in the semi-finals of an international tournament, the likes of which we'd never seen before in Valorant, and something we haven't seen since. Moving on to the grand final, and their opponents will be very familiar to most. They were under the Envy banner at the time, but would later become the dominant Optic team of 2022. This was also their first appearance at an international tournament, so whichever way this went, we'd see a brand new
I
winner
still
for the
remember it was
trophy.
like...
Would NA get
I
their
think it was
second in a row,
Haven.
or could Gambit become
They
the
played
first
Haven,
EU
which
champions?
they didn't play, ever. And... I think it was like Ye did unbelievably well, and they still lost.
Chronicle for so long. Chronicle's not letting anyone pass. He's still trying to fight fully blind. Gambit turtle up. They let nothing. Straight 20 seconds now. Victor, 34 HP.
Fuck, I miss this Gambit team. They're such a good team. And it's like you still see flashes in the pan of like the players on other teams, but it's just not the same. This, like, he's just unreal, man. Get this man back on a team. Like, I don't care what team. Hey, him not being in franchising is the most stupid thing. Like, he was literally the best player of the year before. Also that, like, him putting, I don't know, but like, I've probably talked over it. He put the cam on the spike. Look. Yeah, I love that. It's just I love that's how his brain works. I also suppose actually both of Ye's main agents have now just been murdered. Like Chamber's been killed, Jet's been killed. Wow, we don't know with Jet, but it seems like he's been killed. They won that map, by the way. They just, like, the clips show that it's, like, going well for Envy, but they won that map. And they didn't play it.
Oh
my god.
might be 4 in a second. He's on
Just
the
every
jump.
single one of their players
Gambit
could do
have
shit
made it
like
to
this.
12.
Every single one.
more round, and Gambit
It was like the
walk away.
ultimate bullshit squad.
The man who just destroyed them in the prior round is just around this corner, but the timing, oh my god.
Oh.
He's made a meal of it. It's all going to pieces.
Chronicle, man.
Chronicle in the final.
Shaders has already got his arms in the air. Look. Shaders got his arms in the air. The game's not even done.
Blinded by the lights.
Man's already celebrating.
The Valorant Masters champions.
Gambit took the series 3-0 over Envy and won the Masters Berlin title. They looked completely undefeatable. At
It's a
Envy,
shame
with
there
5
was
of
no
the best
crowd
players in
yet.
the world on every role.
This
Gambit
was
had
still
cemented
COVID
themselves
times.
in the Valorant history books, and with that grand finals win, they had the opportunity to do it again at Champions at the end of the year. December of 2021.
I think me and
rolled
Mitch were
around,
stood on
with
like
it
the
came
balcony
first
just
Valorant
clapping them.
Champions tournament. Gambit would be accompanied there by many teams they'd played before: Envy, Fnatic, Liquid, and Vision Strikers, just to name a few. Luckily though, they got a fairly easy group again, so didn't have to worry about any of those teams. The teams they did have to worry about were Team Secret and Vikings, both minor region squads who were the underdogs in the matches, especially considering Gambit had just come off a title win. They definitely put up strong fights though. Team Secret took a map off of Gambit, although then did get 30-0'd right after, and it got especially scary in the Vikings match. Gambit were down
Gambit definitely used to
12-5 on
dish out the
final
most
lap of
13-0s, that's
one
for
round
sure.
away from the losers bracket once again. But this was a team who could seemingly pull off miracles, and this particular one took them into
Mate,
the
it's just their
playoffs,
defensive
9
side.
rounds in a row.
Might have
to
been one of the
14-12.
worst
And
attacking
with that
teams in
match,
human
they made it
history,
back,
and yet
once
somehow had
again
the
to
best
single and then
defense of any
playoffs.
team
Lose
ever.
once and you're out. Their opponent would have been Envy in this first match had the results gone as predicted, but after a shock upset, it ended up being X10 instead.
Cruise!
X10 had momentum coming in from the previous
That was
game,
always the
but
team
Gambit
that
dealt with them
Envy,
effectively and
Optic,
moved on to the
NRG just could
semi-finals.
never
That
beat.
was the thing about Gambit. Their emphasis on utility usage as opposed to relying on individual skill meant that they tended to get upset a lot less often than other teams, and they still had incredible individual players to top it off. They would need to show that in the semi-finals. which is
Nats'
regarded as one
Viper
of the
at
best
its
series
peak was
in Valorant
unstoppable.
history. Gambit versus Crew. Crew were a similar opponent to X10.
My
They
favourite
both
match
got some
ever.
crazy upsets in
This
the
was
finals
my
and
favourite
Crew
match
were
ever.
fueled by pure
I'd still
passion
not
and
been
had some
beaten to this
incredible
day.
individual
I
players like
can't.
Esnet and Mazzino. Gambit's playstyle seemed to match up well against them, but when a team has that much momentum, sometimes they're impossible
Can't
to
emphasize
stop.
how good. It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about this match.
But they haven't checked it. That's a double, and indeed 4 kills for Kesnet.
Might be able to try and isolate one of these players. It's going to be Klaus on the other side, and the shot is connected. The sneaky push through catches him though. A big round from Delta.
Honestly, at some point, I might just do a stream where I watch this whole game. It's such an incredible match.
Yes, he can. Somebody slowing them down. He's harassing them in the back lines. 20 seconds.
I genuinely remember after this match finished, just sitting down behind the scenes afterwards, just for half an hour doing nothing, just because I was so exhausted.
Crew walk out with 13-7. Map 3 is where we'll decide.
It's mainly this third map. This third map's I think the best map ever.
Playing behind the smoke,
This-
and there's the
this-
opening. As they come around the corner, they're not expecting to still be aggressive. And he's gonna
How does he get? How does he get this kill? It's so ridiculous that he just turns around.
ace for Chronicle. The round saved.
Chronicle produced what I believe to be the best ace in Valorant to this day to keep Gambit alive
I
in this
agree.
match and let them take it home. 18-16 was the final score, and Gambit moved on to the grand final. This was the first time a team had made it to a second grand final. We've seen it a few times more now with Optic, Loud and Fnatic, but Gambit were the first. Their opponents would be Ascend, a well-known foe to them from EMEA.
That's the thing,
CNED was
like,
their flashy jet player,
Ascend
who stood out
winning
in
is
most series,
cool,
but in this tournament,
but
Zeke
I
and
do
Starkzo
think just
stepped
like
up
Gambit
massively to bring
winning the
team to
double
a
would have
level.
been
This would be
just,
far and away Gambit's
it would have
most
just been
difficult
history,
match. Would they be
especially
up to
considering
challenge
what
a
happened with the
white-hot
team
Ascend?
after.
Just a little jump peek, that's enough. Just to reassure. Positioning, what? Zeke? 2 kills out of nowhere, and suddenly this round becomes
It's
a little
crazy
more
to think,
viable.
like,
Time is the biggest problem.
especially now
Oh my
looking
word,
back,
Zeke. Is this when you're
like
gonna step up
Zeke
and deliver? But it's
has gone
gonna be
from
Chronicle.
probably being at this tournament the best player
The timing,
in the
I
world.
don't
Like,
think
he
he's
was
gonna
just
have the time.
unbelievable.
Surely,
Obviously, CNED
surely.
was
Oh
up there,
my God, Zeke has
but in
just
my eyes, Zeke was
destroyed
tournament MVP. He was unbelievable.
key in this one, and Bone Cold's got him across the map. CNET still stands as well. This could be the one. This could be the round to take him across the line. Nats, the last one alive here, and Ascend bound back. 13-7. There is life in them yet.
Then came Fracture, and Nats gave the people what they wanted.
at Nats to try and find something to do. He's right out of drop already. Potential to challenge Keyless, and he will win it out. He'll find both.
I still enjoy watching him play Cypher, like, now. That's one agent where he'll just always be the king. He's 15-0. Like, what the fuck? This is a great grand final as well. Like, obviously there were some dominant maps in it, but it was like, it was a toe-to-toe. I'm pretty sure, like, Ascend as well just reamed out, like, Team Liquid in the semi-finals.
And after taking the lead in the final moments of Icebox, Gambit looked primed to take the Champions Trophy. But Ascend refused to be put down.
It's just disrespectful. Peak Starzo, peak CNET, peak Zeke.
Make it one. Red guys, is there anything left in the tank? Or have Ascend done enough to take us all the way here? Red guy, gonna get towards the spike. The spike.
Something tells me he's not going to win this round.
Someone stop him. It's gonna be Zeke.
Zeke playing Reyna on Icebox. Down we go back.
Split was the final map, and Ascend simply had too much momentum for Gambit to stop. They took the series 3-2 in the closest grand final of the pre-franchising era. Gambit hadn't managed to win a second international trophy in a row, but they'd come damn close, and things were only looking up for 2023. A new system in Europe meant that Gambit didn't have to play a whole split in Russia, and could go straight into playing against the whole region. That meant that 2022 started with a match against...
Damn, were they still... So that, the year that they played their best, they were still playing through the CIS? I feel so long ago that was happening.
It was as sudden as it was brutal and relentless. Ukrainians woke up to find themselves plunged into the midst of war. Explosions and air raid sirens ringing out here in Kyiv and cities across this country.
I was literally, well, I've talked about this a little bit, but I was literally in Kiev
with the Russian invasion of Ukraine
3 or 4 days before this, but I got like a thing like warning me like, yeah, you should probably leave. And so me and my girlfriend, who's Ukrainian, came to the UK, and it just...
Eventually, Gambit and Riot came to an agreement that allowed the team to compete under a neutral name, not representing Gambit. That
definitely the craziest thing I've experienced in my life, that's for sure.
Since they'd missed 3 weeks of the group stage, they had to play games on 3 days in a row, now without an org. The whole situation didn't seem to have a big impact on Gambit's performance originally. They 2-0'd each of the 3 series on their return week in convincing fashion. That took them into the playoffs, where they 2-0'd Guild in the first
That's the thing, we'll
round,
never truly know what would have happened with this roster, because like, because of everything that happened, but also like, like the meta definitely shifted away from one that helped them, like Defo's Chamber was nowhere near as good. I do still feel like Defo was used as a scapegoat, because I don't think this team was like as bad as they thought it was. Oh, it's this match! I still, like, 0.02, right? That was the number on the defuse for them to win this game. Was it 23-21 the scoreline? Something like that. Unbelievable match. Nats again proving that he can play like fucking any agent. Defo playing a Neon.
Are holding on to it. In fact, they're mounting a little bit of a retake of their own, wanting to mount this fight towards the wrap, and they've run into Nats. That blind is perfect, but a little bit too late. And now it's going to be left just into the hands of Mystic on the flank. Magnum at least able to grab one, the defuse.
This is another one. I might just have to watch back this entire match as well. Let me know if that's something you guys are interested in, because it's like these were my favorite games ever to cast. Such an insane matchup. Oh yeah, Braves on the team as well. This is it. 0.02. I didn't even show it. It was 0.02. Trust me. It's etched into my brain.
I mean, they need a god-tier performance to get out alive in this one. They have to catch Durka, and they've done none of it. Fnatic win this one out.
Oh my god, Durka with hair. He didn't even have the ball buff here. I love how Magnum doesn't even have a fucking camera.
Down 9-3 to a 23-21 overtime. Unfortunately, it didn't go Mech's way, and Fnatic qualified to Reykjavik. Mech was 0.02 seconds away from qualifying.
Oh, there you go.
0.02 seconds separated them from having the chance to cement themselves as the best team in Valorant history. Mech returned for Split 2 after seeing their old rivals in Optic win the international title. It was a rocky group stage for them, only winning 2 matches and qualifying to playoffs by 4 rounds.
Yeah, this was bullshit. I actually think Na'Vi deserved to qualify over them. As with like Cloud and SSK, I think they would have actually had a real chance to make it.
In FPX. So again, if they had won that series, who knows what they could have done in Denmark. With the final tournament of 2022 being champions, Mech had one final chance to make it to the international stage again, the last chance qualifier. Something to note is that before the LCQ, they made a roster change. Defo made way for JD to add even more flexibility to the roster. Now,
oh, this is where they fucked the grand final. This is where they subbed in fucking Purpo for the last map.
And Optic. But that all started with another revenge match against Ascend in the first round of LCQ.
I couldn't believe that. The very last map, they subbed in Purpo and he got blasted. It was just...
That brought them into the upper semis.
Some of the decisions made were wild. Like, I'll never quite understand that.
Liquid had once again activated the LCQ buff and made it to the upper final, despite some roster changes before the tournament. If Mech won this match, they'd be one game away. Map 1, 13-8 Liquid. Map 2, 13-8 Mech. Map 3, Icebox.
Yeah, well, this is over. There's no way Nats wins this, right?
Don't say that.
Right, he's in a 1-on-3.
I know, Pavlov.
Oh, it's X and Zesh.
You know what he's capable of.
He's very much capable of many, many things.
He wins this, doesn't he? Well, it's in the video, so I assume he wins it, but it's also just Nats.
This could be the play of his life.
It's not the play of his life, mate. Like, don't get me wrong. It's very good, but you have to remember who you're talking about. I know you're hyping this up, X-Warrior.
After losing to Mech in the upper final, Liquid beat G2.
Okay, so it wasn't this time, it was the next time they played. And yeah, it was the very last map of the best of 5. They subbed in. Oh yeah, Demasick on Liquid. I always forget that he was there.
They seem to have some kind of Valorant blessing.
Shields not in play for everyone, and Scream's just going. Already destroying their trap. This will be information. It doesn't even realize. Jado's caught sleeping, it seems, and he's just gonna keep going.
What? He gets the third one. That's madness. Yeah, look, Purpo's playing. This is the last map. This is the one that they'd lose. They subbed out JD for Purpo. And he didn't do well, but if your first map of the entire split is the last, that's...
Mech had a very
weird decision
too, and seemed not to be destined to make an international tournament. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. In fact, it probably hurt even more, knowing that they could have continued their legacy as one of the best teams in the world, if it wasn't for circumstances completely out of their control. This team looked unbeatable in their prime. Who knows how far they could have gone. The story of Gambit and their potential as a team will live on in the pre-franchising Valorant history books, as the era we could have had.
This will always be like the...
Gambit,
you know that you're like you're a proper Valorant fan if you... Alright, maybe we'll look at this one a little bit later, but yeah, if you're an old school Valorant fan, you're a fan of Mech. Like that's how it works. Anyway, guys, as said, I might do some videos where I like watch some of the old matches back, if that's something you're interested in. But either way, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you liked in the comments, and let me know how much you miss Mech. Either way, see you soon. Bye.